Welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be talking about GloFish. GloFish, well, yes, I did put a few aquariums on because I have this catch-all phrase at the end of my channels, but I guess it could fit into the technology part. However, GloFish actually is very interesting. GloFish is somewhat controversial and was sometimes is confused with another type of fish called a painted fish. This is not a fish that has been injected with dye artificially to make it look like bright colors and stuff like that. This fish is genetically engineered to be fluorescent through different methods. So, how does this work? Well, first we're going to get into the science behind this a little bit. Around the turn of the century, researchers in Singapore pioneered the ability to take green fluorescent protein genetics from jellyfish and inject it into an embryonic cell of a zebra daniel or zebrafish. And as the fish grew, all of its cells has the green fluorescent protein in it, and therefore the start of the GloFish. The history of this company that actually markets GloFish is patented, so it's actually, believe it or not, a product that for like any other fish you buy in the fish store, if you breed it and you sell it, no problem. This actually is patented, and if you were to breed GloFish, it's actually considered illegal if you were to do it for profit. Now, obviously, if two GloFish got together, had babies, that's nature. You really can't do anything about it. But legally, you're not supposed to purposely breed and sell GloFish. Because the green fluorescent protein, or the type of protein that's injected into the nucleus of the cell at birth, is an embryonic cell, the whole organism, i.e. the fish, eventually becomes fluorescent. Now, there are different types of fish that they have released over the years, and again, Yorktown Technologies in Austin, Texas, right up the road from me, they have taken different fluorescent colors and placed it into different fish, including tetras, including the original zebra daniels come out with different. And now they've actually put it in bettas. And so I'm going to show you a little bit about the GloFish Betta that I purchased, and also compare what a normal betta looks like, of course. Yes, I know, a lot of people said betta. I just like to say betta. I think KG Tropicals, they like to say betta, so I'll take the lead from them.
Now here is one of my betta swimming in a 5-gallon tank, the fluvial chi, which I've shown before, and this betta seems perfectly happy. Genetic variation happens to nature, and in fact, this betta was bred to look like this betta, and there's all kinds of different ways in which man modifies through selective breeding and changes the genetics of each generation. Here is my GloFish betta. And once again, this is genetically modified, but however, we, through natural ways in the past, and also nature itself through natural ways, has always changed genetics. And I'll go on to discuss some of the ways that nature does it and how we've arrived at today using genetic modified organisms.
Fluorescence exists naturally in nature in quite a many diverse amount of species. Of course, the most famous one is probably jellyfish that comes to mind, but certainly mollusks such as certain clams, as well as certain types of fish species, naturally have fluorescence encoded into their DNA. And this is not actually that unusual. There's bacteria, for example, that are fluorescent as well. Over the years, people have bred dogs, for example, into all different kinds of types of dogs, such as toy dogs to greyhounds to Great Danes to pugs, and they're all dogs. They're all the same species, but yet at the same time, through selective breeding, you get such genetic variation that really you kind of wonder if they truly are the same species, but they are. Now, so bacteria, for example, in nature, let's say these are two bacterial cells that are kind of floating along. Well, they have bacteria DNA, but within the bacteria DNA exists something a little smaller. And for example, I'll say this little white circle is what exists within the bacteria cell itself, but it's actually not part of its own DNA. It's separate. It's called a plasmid. This plasmid can actually be transmitted. This plasmid can actually be transmitted from bacteria to bacteria. And that's actually how antibiotic resistance, for example, can develop as bacteria develop mutations or adaptations in their plasmid genes. It is known to cause problems through things such as antibiotic resistance. Other things that can insert genes into organisms, including such as viruses, etc., do this naturally. This is where the advent of technology comes in. Technology these days allows us to modify the genetics of organisms. GMO, genetically modified organisms, that's what that term means. Now, one of the things, of course, is these fish really, because of the fact that the gene is put into their genetics, really don't have a lesser of lifespan or a worse lifespan or function any differently. They aren't harmed or traumatized anyway. They're grown this way. And certainly there were certain studies that were done to see its environmental impact. And at the end of the day, well, yes, it's still controversial for some people. The conclusion was that by the FDA that the fish, even if it were released into the wild, would not become an invasive species. And if anything, because of its bioluminescence, would actually be easier to be preyed upon by other fish because it actually be seen a little bit easier. Therefore, its environmental impact was determined to be minimal, to none. Again, that's not my opinion. I'm just merely expressing what has been determined. And of course now, when you go to any fish store, such as the major chains, PetSmart, Petco, etc., you're going to see a GloFish section. And they're quite expensive. Why are they expensive? Well, they're genetically engineered. They're GMO, genetically modified organisms. Therefore, it really represents human technology that has come very far. Again, the way you can insert the DNA of the fluorescent protein into the gene of a fish is at the embryonic stage, or at the embryonic cell stage, the one cell stage, in which you insert the gene there. And then after you insert the gene into this fish and you start breeding these fish, it will naturally pass along this gene to its offsprings. So you don't really have to keep inserting it every time into each embryonic cell. That probably would take quite a bit of effort and probably make it not very cost effective. But yet, GloFish is something that really attracts quite a lot of people because it glows. And however, such novelty and its ethical debate behind that, again, I'm going to stay out of that. It's a product that's out there. It's approved for sale. People have purchased it. Certainly, I purchased a GloFish Betta to see how it would act. Place it in a proper tank. Bettas really should be no less than a 2.5 gallon to 3 gallon tank. So I have my Bettas in a 5 gallon tank. Actually, I've got multiple tanks, at least 3 gallons or above, and with Bettas. And in terms of technology for human beings, we have harnessed this power. We've studied, we understand genetics, we understand what DNA is, and we understand how to insert genetic material from one organism into another. Now there's different various ways of introducing it. There's even a mechanical way of directly injecting DNA into the nucleus of a cell. So therefore, if you can extract the DNA portion of fluorescence from, say, a jellyfish and put it into some kind of a vector and then insert it into a cell, that cell will all of a sudden become fluorescent. If you do it in an embryonic cell, that cell now becomes and develops into a living organism that fluoresces. So we have incredibly sped up the ability for genetic variation to be altered.
And here we see Sunshine, my little female GloFish Betta that I purchased. She's already adapted well to her 5-gallon tank here. And like any betta, or any fish for that matter, you keep the tank clean, regular water changes, monitored parameters. She'll do just fine. And she should live a normal life like any other betta. There you see my little North Orange lobster in the background living in harmony. And quite frankly, she does not know the difference whatsoever. When you turn off the lights, as you can see, she glows. We have, as mankind, have always tried to alter genetics through selective breeding. And for example, this has been done in all different kinds of ways, as in the example I've talked about dogs and the incredible different variations of dogs. But we also have done this with bettas naturally as well through selective breeding. And the only difference now is that we are altering genetics at a much faster pace. Now, here again is my natural quote-unquote betta, but this betta started looking like this because of the fact that he was bred to be this way. So thanks again for visiting my channel, and I hope you enjoyed this video. This last shot is of my dog Grace, who is mostly pug, a little beagle, and was made this way. Have a good night, and thanks again for visiting.